is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Grace of Kings, chapters 9 through 13, brought to you by Kyle. In these chapters, I'm really excited. There's a lot of stuff that happens here, but mostly I'm really excited that Mata has a horse. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. These chapters, man, it was really alarming actually when I opened up the commission and it said 5 chapters and I was like, guys, really? Yikes. Okay. But yeah, they're very short chapters, a lot of them. The first one's only 2 pages long almost. And Kyle says, this book's dope and the sequel is even better. We hang with a bunch of people who fucking suck and a few who don't. Yeah, that pretty much wraps it up. I think I'm done. Thanks for coming, guys. Yeah, so this first chapter of this section is the perspective of the emperor, who is a little child. And this child is a child, unsurprisingly, very much believing that the adults in his life are telling him the truth and have his best interest at heart because he does not understand the world yet, because nobody does when they're a little child unless they've really been through some shit. And this kid has not, spoiler alert. And he is ignorant. He has no idea what the people in his empire are suffering. So there's a part, there's this whole thing about how there's a literal wine fountain in the throne room with models of the different islands and everything built into it, which is just so incredibly decadent and insane. I always wonder about things like that, how much people actually drink from fountains like that. I have to imagine that nobody drains that whole fountain and replaces all that wine with any sort of frequency. So eventually that wine is going to be disgusting, right? It's just going to smell like vinegar pretty soon. I just feel like that's something that somebody should have acknowledged. Not that this kid's probably drinking too much wine. I don't know his life. Maybe he is. But it just really always gets in my head, because I'm somebody who loves food, to see food being abused in such a way. The other thing is they suggest that they should have a where's the part that I'm trying to wouldn't it be fun for the emperor to be able to survey his realm from his throne? Just by looking down, he would see the literally wine-dark seas and enjoy the sight of his ministers and generals island hopping as they tried to walk up to present their reports and counsel. So, not only is this a fountain that's in his throne room, but it's the walkway to get to him, which is hilarious. That's so funny to me. Can you imagine? This book is so deceptively funny. And there are so many things that I just want to see on screen, because I'm not sure that mere words can quite get across the absurdity of a few moments that they have. It's just things like that, men who are probably take themselves very seriously, wearing these elaborate silk outfits, holding their skirts up and trying to jump Jesus Christ. The whole thing is just so amazing. Chatelain Pyrrha, really Chief Augur Pyrrha, but he was so humble that he retained his old title, which he said made him feel closer to the emperor. Always had such wonderful ideas. So yeah, this is the Chatelain's idea. And of course, I'm still what is his game here? Because I said this a couple episodes ago, that the way the Chatelain decided to overthrow everything did not feel like somebody who like wants to be king himself, unless he's simply trying to make everybody realize that the present crew is so incompetent that they have to overthrow him. And I would say that isn't his goal, because he's busy like killing everybody who has this like the temerity to say anything negative. So I was just really puzzled, and we find out a little bit more about that a little bit later. When ministers and generals came up to him with reports of troubling rebels in remote corners of the empire, he impatiently brushed them away. Go talk to the regent. Couldn't they see he was too busy playing with Chatelain Pyrrha, a wonderful friend who always warned him not to work too hard and not to neglect having fun while he was young? That was the whole point of being emperor, wasn't it? Ringa, Pyrrha said, what do you think about a maze made of fine fish and tasty meats? We could hang all manner of delicious treats from the ceiling, and you could wear a blindfold and try to make a path through the maze by taste alone. I don't even know what that means. Try to make a path through the maze? If it's just meat, you just eat your way through wherever, right? I'm so confused by it. But obviously, the emperor adores this plan. It's almost as if somebody suggested that he got to eat candy. Meat is like candy. And if someone had informed him that men were dying every day in the islands for lack of a cup of rice, he would have been surprised. Why do they insist on eating rice? Meat is so much better. And again, it's tempting to hate this little emperor because he's so fucking clueless and he could help so many people and he just doesn't. But he's ignorant. He doesn't know how people are suffering. And I'm confident that, you know, maybe he is trash. I don't know. But I am confident that he still has the empathy that a child has, based on the fact that he enjoys going to pet animals and that he likes to play. He's not Joffrey. He's not trying to shoot people for fun, you know. I'm confident that if they brought him out and let him see the way that people are suffering, he would try and help. But the regent is doing everything he can to not do, or not the regent, the chatelain is doing everything that he can to keep him from having to deal with anything and see anything directly, because I think he's afraid of the very same thing, that this is a kid that really would help if he could, and he can't have that. All right. So the next chapter, that's like, you know, like I said, like 3 pages. Chapter 10 is Regent Krupo, who is the one I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle, because like I said, keeping track of a lot of these names can be tricky. But Regent Krupo is the one that the chatelain got in touch with and like convinced to help him take over. And yeah. Okay, good. I have this right. So Chatelain Pyrrha was the one who had explained to the emperor that the best way to honor his father was to build the great mausoleum, a house for his eternal afterlife that would be even more splendid than the palace in Pan. Since the emperor's mother had died long ago after displeasing the Mepidere, which I'm just going to do the Jim Halpert stare at the camera. Did she? You don't say. His father was really the only parent he could celebrate. Didn't Khan Fiji, the great Anno sage, teach that a child should always honor his parents to the best of his ability? But it was up to Lugo Krupo to make that dream real. He had to turn the emperor's childish drawings into real plans, draft the men to make the plans come to life, and order the soldiers to drive the lazy laborers to do their duty. Why do you fill the emperor's head with such foolish ideas? Asked Krupo. Regent, remember how we got to where we are today. Do you not feel the ghost of Emperor Mepidere watching over us? Krupo felt a chill going up his spine, but he was a rational man, and he did not believe in ghosts. What's done is done. Then feel the eyes of the world watching, scrutinizing us for signs of devotion. As you said, it can sometimes be difficult for servants to express their loyalty clearly. Think of the monument to Emperor Mepidere as a complicated way for us to earn tranquility of mind and certainty in our places. He's a tricksy little man. This is he's obviously being manipulated, but it's very effective to just be like, you have to prove that we're devoted to the emperor and that we would never dream of doing anything to like jeopardize his position. And we would never have done anything to jeopardize the position of the rest of his family either. Like, yeah, that makes sense. So we're going to just humor the prince in this giant fucking plan, which makes no sense. But it turns out that all of this power that he was really eager to grab is no fun. And the thing is, as we find out later, that's by design. The chatelain is making sure that he doesn't have fun because he's trying to ruin everything for everybody. So this is kind of hilarious in retrospect that this guy is like, well, I thought that I was going to be able to be like a great sage and philosopher, but now I just have to like make buildings and shit. And it's like, this is so, I mean, obviously, like I said, this is an orchestrated move here. And also, the chatelain is encouraging everybody with any kind of complaint to go straight to the regent instead of talking to the emperor at all. So, don't get me wrong, a lot of this is by design. But also, I think that this is just life, right? Where you see a position somewhere and you're like, man, if I could only just do that, everything would be fine. And then you get there and you're like, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake. So he is just baffled at the fact that he keeps being asked to handle things that, in his opinion, and I'm not clear on what any of these positions do. I don't know enough about the courts. I used to, but it was obviously European courts. I'm sure it's different. But long since I've forgotten all of that stuff. So I don't know how much of this is his responsibility normally and how much of it's been piled onto his plate because of this whole plan. But he feels clearly put out by all of it. He wanted to be the architect of grand visions, of new systems of laws, and new philosophies that would dazzle the ages. Who had time to philosophize, though, when people knocked on your door every quarter of an hour? I really love this story because it is, petty is the word that Kyle is using in the comments to describe him. Correct. Petty, insecure, childish, and really just limited. This is a man without great ideas, and rather than valuing other people's great ideas and seeing the beauty of those ideas and studying them and acknowledging them, he is jealous that he did not come up with them and that he is not getting the credit for them. And it's really the kind of thing like, you know, he is convinced up to a point that if he was just given as much of a chance that he'd be able to do as well. But he was given a chance finally and he still doesn't. So all that remains to him eventually is to remove his competitor. So we get the backstory of his childhood, and he was literally a beggar. Like, his parents were bakers. He gets captured. He's sold into slavery, but then he's what's the word? I'm trying to find the word that I want. Well, anyway, he's freed, but I wanted the better word. And when he's freed, they don't have a plan for him. They're not like, oh, you poor kid, we're going to put you into social services and get you a foster home. No, they dump him on the street and they're like, figure it out. And by figure it out, they mean beg and steal, which is exactly what he does. Until a really important man, Guy Anji, who is an advisor to the king and like a lawmaker, passes him in the street and sees something in him and decides to train him as one of his students. And Tan Fiuji is one of his classmates. Tan Fiuji is brilliant. He's just one of those to whom things come easily. He can read well. He can write well. He has no problem absorbing and understanding and working with larger ideas and building on them to create something of his own. He speaks his mind without regard to what other people are going to think of it. And that gives his work a certain honesty and authenticity that Krupo does not have. And Krupo sees that Feiji is doing really well, and Feiuji is doing well, and wants to do as well as him in absorbing and proving his master right for taking him in also. Whereas Feiuji could immediately come up with 3 different answers whenever Anji asked him a question, Krupo struggled to even understand the point Anji made by asking it. This is so hard to read because at this point in the story, I feel for the kid in a lot of ways. Krupo had to work hard for every bit of progress. It took him a long time to learn the Zindari letters, and longer still to master enough logograms to read Anji's simpler treatises. Often the master grew impatient with the boy and threw up his hands in despair. Conversing with the brighter Feiuji was so much more pleasant. Yet Krupo persevered. He wanted more than anything to please Master Anji, and if that meant he had to read the same book 3 times to absorb the meaning, that he had to practice carving and writing the same logogram 100 times, that he had to sit and work out a parable like a puzzle for hours, he did them all without complaint. He was the very definition of diligence, as he squeezed every minute out of the day to study. He read while he ate. He did not play games with the other boys. He sat on sharp pebbles instead of sitting mats so that he would concentrate instead of becoming too comfortable and falling asleep. Gradually, Krupo became one of Anji's best students. When speaking to kings, Anji often mentioned that of all the young men he had taught in his life, only Feiuji and Krupo had understood everything he had to teach them and then gone on into the terra incognita of new ideas. So, this, again, at this point, I really feel for the kid because he is trying so hard, and this is going to sound really arrogant when I say it, but I want y'all to know that I include myself in this as much as anybody in certain ways. There are people whose minds just work in a certain way and others don't. And they can understand more nuanced ideas, or their mind is somehow freer from like the constraints of traditional thinking, and they can explore outside of what they've been taught much more easily without it straining them or without them having to force it. And if they're talking philosophy and law, it seems like those are the kinds of things that would come in handy in this way. And I am better than a lot of people when it comes to like understanding points and having self-awareness and that sort of thing. But I'm sure not awesome at it. Like, there are so many instances in my life where somebody has just said something in a slightly different way and brought me up short as I realize that I've never thought about it like that before, ever. And they have just put the fucking nail right through the point in this like inescapable way. And I'm startled at how plainly they've put it and how completely like there's no arguing with what they're saying because it's so clear. And yet I never in a million years would have approached it from that angle. I've come across that a drajillion times. Like, so the absolute frustration that one must have when you're trying to please somebody, when you're trying to prove that you're as good, when it comes right down to it, you're not. He's trying to be somebody else, and it's kind of heartbreaking initially. Like, it really is. It's a sort of, it's a Salieri, right, to Mozart sort of thing, where Salieri is so pious and so devoted to music and wants so badly to do well. And here comes this fucking dude who just no effort at all. And he's just whipping out like these amazing sonatas and whatever music. I don't know music, guys. Don't quiz me on this. Except for the fact that I don't get the sense that Feiuji is a complete shitbird like Mozart is. But you know, this is a resentment of a kid, and it festers. And that's the problem, is that at this point in his life, I get it. And I understand his frustrations, and I see that as a very valid thing, that life isn't fair when it deals out the way that your mind works and the capacity that you have. So here, I still am on his side. But then you start to get into his adulthood, where he begins to try to pursue a career. And at every turn, he swears, and this is an unreliable narrator, so I don't know how true this is, but at every turn, he swears that everybody is wishing that he was Feijuji. He does this amazing calligraphy that everybody admires, but even there, he feels like people are sort of condescending with it, like they're saying, wow, I can't imagine someone like you can do this. It's not, wow, you're just great at this. It's, considering how you grew up, your talent is really impressive. That qualifier that just irritates him. And behind the recognition, there was also an implicit dismissal, as if Krupo's hard work could never measure up to Feijuji's natural brilliance, which I, again, don't know if he's right about that, or if he's just really paranoid. But there is something to be said for the fact that we respect talent more than hard work a lot of the time in the world. And it's a shame, because it teaches kids that if they're not implicitly talented, or talented to a degree that's like startling and like a prodigy, that they aren't going to be able to make it, which is not true. You can be a prodigy and not work and wind up falling apart and not making anything of yourself. And if you are somebody who is moderately good at something and put in the work, you can gradually become great. And let's be honest, plenty of people who are just middle of the road at any sort of skill still manage to make a living. You know, they might not be fucking Beyonce, but they still can get by. But that's not what Krupo wants. He doesn't want to get by. He doesn't want to, you know, have a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. He wants to live in the White House. And Feijuji is like his shadow that haunts him all the time. And it's really hard to know how much of that is real and how much of that is in his head, leftover baggage from his childhood. Tan became the prime minister of Han at the age of 20, and his essays on governance were more widely circulated and highly regarded than anything Krupo wrote. So if you're looking at this seems like he's probably right. Even King Reo of Xana, the future emperor Mapedere, who had little good to say about the scholars of the 6 states, said he found Feijuji's writing enlightening. But Krupo thought Feijuji's essays insipid. They were so flowery and illogical. All this concern about the virtuous ruler and the harmonious society and the path of balance nauseated him. They were constructed like castles in the air with soaring rhetoric and lovely turns of phrase, but no care for the foundation. Feijuji's belief in a ruler who ruled but lightly, stepping out of the way of the people, who could better their own circumstances through hard work and their own initiative, seemed to Krupo hopelessly naive. If the experience of living in the war-torn Tiro states taught men anything, it was that the common people were little better than animals who had to be herded and corralled by strong rulers advised by men with vision. What strong states needed were severe laws administered efficiently and without mercy. I found this amusing because this argument is a little bit like the regulation, anti-regulation crowd argument. And it's not really, but humor me for just a second, because I really, in some ways, see where Krupo's coming from on this. Like, there is nothing like the 2016 election to make me go, wow, most people are fucking idiots who should not be trusted to raise a child. Never mind to construct systems of government and, businesses and shit like this. On the other hand, what I feel like Feijuji is trying to say is that people generally are just trying to live their lives and be successful and there's not this, sort of baseness to all of them I'm like, I think maybe that's true. I'm not sure how true that is, but I kind of I would be interested to hear more about this from both of them, because I'm not sure how much I agree with Feiuji, even though he's the one that we're seeing as being like the example of what's sort of right here. And by example of what's right, I don't mean according to Krupo, because obviously Krupo disagrees with him. I mean, according to what the author, I think, is trying to say. But anyway, Krupo knew all the kings and ministers in their heart of hearts agreed with him, not Feiuji. Lugo was the one who said what they really needed to hear. Yet they continued to heap praise and honor only on Tan. His many letters to the Kokru court in Koruza, wow, that was a sentence to say. His many letters to the Kokru court in Koruza offering his services went unanswered. So he goes to his master and says, "Why am I not as well respected?" "Tan writes of the world as it ought to be, not as it is," Anji said. Krupo bowed to his teacher. "Do you think I am the better writer?" Yi Anji looked at him and sighed. "Tan writes without concern about pleasing others, and that is why men find his voice fresh and original." The veiled criticism stung. Yeah, well, he got him there, didn't he? A man's circumstances are not determined by his talents, but by where he chooses to put his talents to work. Xana is strong, and Kokru is weak. Only a fool goes down with a sinking ship. So this is when he goes to Xana and starts working with the king, or with the emperor. Guess what? The emperor also seems to not value him the way that he would value Feiushi. Like, there's still that feeling to him. Every time he was consulted, he heard behind the king's words an unvoiced regret. If only Tan Feiuji were sitting here with me instead. And one has to wonder, if he's like this advisor, how much differently everything could have been handled if he weren't the advisor. If there was somebody who believed in the people and believed in the ultimate goodness and competence of the populace, how much could have changed by the virtue of someone who had that sort of faith and kindness and compassion by the emperor's side. But that was not to be. After the fall of the Han capital, Tan Feiushi was captured. Rian was ecstatic. "Finally," the king boasted, "I will have a chance to convince a great man to join my cause. There are many in the islands who admire his wisdom. Having him on the side of Xana would be better than 1,000 horses or 10 fearless generals. He is as exceptional among mere scholars as a Kruban among mere whales or a Diran among mere fish." So Krupo goes to Tan Feiuji's cell. And it's pretty heartbreaking here because Tan Feiuji has no idea Krupo's intentions and greets him like an old friend and is telling him not to blame himself for the way things have gone because he couldn't have stopped this man, because he still thinks that Krupo has the same sort of mindset that he does and sees everything that's been happening as crimes and you know, a humanitarian crisis. Whereas Krupo is like, no, this is what I want. But Feiuji does not know that or understand that about him. You came to me because you wished to apologize for not being able to dissuade King Rian from his mad vision of conquest. And you're embarrassed because you think an apology inadequate when Han has fallen and I am here, a prisoner awaiting execution. So again, he thinks he's going to be killed. He has no idea that the king wants to make him his like senior advisor and values him and is excited to like have captured him because of who he is, not because of trying to make an example of him, which like, oh, is that heartbreaking. It really kills me. And so like, you know, he's sitting across from this dude who he thinks is his friend that is trying his best, and that the guy his friend is working for wants him dead. And what's the opposite? It's the opposite, where his friend is the one who wants him dead and his boss actually values him. And Krupo gives him a drink from a separate bottle that he brought with him, which if Feiuji had any understanding of Krupo, he would not have drank. But he doesn't know who this guy is. So he drinks it and then dies. And Krupo says, I am no longer the second best. To which I'm like, no, but you still are, though. Like, that guy may be dead, but he's so great, obviously, that in death, he will still be better than you. So, guess what? So yeah, he kills this guy thinking that this is going to bring him where he wants to be. But it does not. And so the king is asking him who he should, or the emperor is asking, who should we appoint as commander-in-chief against the rebels? And this motherfucker here is such a petty little shit that instead of thinking about who would actually be best for the job, he thinks about who's personally annoying him and sends that guy just to get that dude out of his own hair. And that guy is an accountant. Like, that's what he's the minister of the treasury who sends way too many, like, petitions into his inbox and is irritating. Kindo Marana is going to be the fucking, like, general in charge of the army to take down the rebels. It's insanity. Sending the chief tax collector, a bean counter among bean counters, to supervise the army against the bandits seemed deliciously absurd, and he was impressed with his own wit. Now, again, impressed with his own wit. Like, what a beautiful line as an author to really get across how completely unaware somebody is. That's the kind of shit that, like, Cersei Lannister would do. Congratulate herself, you know, over some shit that she's like, oh, my own Lord Father could have done no better. Well, yeah, but he could, though. You're crazy, and you fucked up big time just now, you idiot. So, yeah, this moron does not see long term that maybe putting down the rebels is kind of important to your own life. Maybe you don't want the king that you work for to get taken down by a rebellion, so perhaps it would be smart to put someone in charge who gives a fuck and knows what they're doing. Now, it turns out Kindo does give a fuck. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he's really trying. And in that, Kruto has gotten more than he ever really deserved. Or Krupo. He made a better decision than I think he realized because he really didn't care. Simply because of the fact that this dude actually is a thinking person. But we'll get there. So let's go to the chatelain. The chatelain, who I had been seeing as sort of like the Grand Vizier, like sitting in the corner, like evilly cackling and rubbing his hands together. Turns out he doesn't want power necessarily. I'm saying necessarily because honestly his end game isn't entirely clear. All he says is that he's going to commit treason and fuck shit up. But in the end, what does that mean? So this whole thing is, it starts off as a kid. He was friends with the king as a child and took his beatings for him, like took responsibility every time some shit went wrong. As a kid, he would like say, oh no, it was all my idea. And like, you know, and was just really loyal and really just the whole thing. It's setting up that they are such good friends that nothing could separate the two of them until something does. A woman, obviously, of course, Lady Maying. Pyrrha, which is the first name of the chatelain, Pyrrha is married at the time that he meets Lady Maying, but he isn't interested in his wife, and his job is so... he finds it to be so lowly that he doesn't even want to have children because bringing them into that life, in his eyes, is really not, like... it's not kind or responsible. So he is celibate. It's not even that he's, like, sleeping with women other than his wife. He's just not sleeping with anybody. And kind of is, like, dead in that respect. And then he meets Maying, and there's something about her, and it just wakes him up, and he, like, falls for her right away. And they actually do have sex. And he finally realizes that, like, despite the fact, because she used to be the daughter of, like, a duke, but when their place was, like, captured and sacked, she got turned into, like, a servant girl. She's a slave. And he realizes at one point that, like, he's really a slave also. Like, he has more respect and, like, slightly more power, but really in the end not. He's, like, at the mercy of the emperor and is, as he puts it, a glorified slave. And this connects him in a deeper way as well. So one night, Emperor Mapidere held a banquet for his generals, and Pyrrha wanted to wait until after the banquet, when the emperor would be in a good mood, to ask a favor of him. He would ask Rhea, his old friend and playmate, to release Maying from her servitude and let him have her. Well, guess what? The emperor is bored that night and is looking for something to amuse him, and he had never noticed Maying before, but that very evening, he really sees her for the first time and is like, well, damn, yeah, she's coming home with me. And that is one of those things that, like, I know that this is just a myth and this is not something that the author took into consideration at all, but there is nothing like finally meeting a guy and getting, like, noticed to make all these other guys suddenly notice you too. As a woman, this is what I have experienced, is that if I have ever been single and kind of like, man, I'm really not meeting anybody, and this is sort of frustrating, and I don't know, the instant one guy sees me, it's like it flicks a switch that makes me visible to everybody else. So there's something about this that the emperor never noticed her until his friend was into her and she had suddenly been sort of awake. That's like, you know, so, yeah, the emperor takes her and makes her his consort. Not consort. One of his many consorts. When I say consort, it sounds like it means more than it does. It does not. And she gets pregnant. And everybody is so pleased for her because if she is pregnant, then her place is really secure. And that's, like, going to be an honor. But her baby is born 2 months earlier than it should have been. And despite him being born so early, he's very healthy and weighs the proper amount. He's not, it's clear she was pregnant before she ever got with the emperor. And the doctor pushes her and interrogates her until she tells him the truth. And I'm super mad at the doctor over this. I really wish that somebody had just, like, killed that dude before this all happened. And since then, Pyrrha had relived that day 100,000 times in his mind. Could he have saved his son? Could he have saved Maying? Could he have silenced the doctor with gold and jewels? Could he have thrown himself at the emperor's feet and pled for mercy? Was he such a coward that he could not even protect the one person in this world he loved? He imagined himself leaving everything behind so that he and Maying could have escaped in a small fishing boat, bound for ports unknown and a lifetime of looking over their shoulders. But she would be alive. Alive. Yet every scenario ended with the same result. Death to his entire family, his parents, his wife, his uncles and aunts. Treason was a taint in the blood, and a traitor's sin was borne by the whole family. He could not think of what he could have done differently, but he blamed himself nonetheless. And this is one of those things where it's like, really, honestly, I don't know what to tell you. Like, those are both awful, horrible options. So yeah, I feel him on this. So he tells the emperor that he has no idea who the father is, that she won't say who the father is. And he thinks about trying to be like, obviously this was before she was ever with you. She didn't cheat on you, but it doesn't matter because since she is a slave owned by the emperor, she's not supposed to be fucking anybody. Like, either way, whether she's been chosen by him as a consort or not, it's still fucking with some other dude's property. So it would still, you know, so he watched and said nothing as the boy was smothered in front of Lady Maying. He watched and said nothing as the imperial guards strangled her. Then he went to dispose of the bodies, and he strained to show nothing in his face as his hands touched her cold skin. He did make a vow, though. He would avenge her and bring down the house of Xana. He would truly, spectacularly, really commit treason. So this is what I mean when I say that I don't really know his final objective. Sorry, I'm seeing Kyle's comment. It means he's deliberately driving the Empire underground. Sure, yeah, obviously. But what I mean is he doing this in the hopes of himself taking a position of emperor? Or is he doing this in the hopes of restoring all of the other islands to their own rulership again? Is he trying to completely undo everything the emperor did and break apart this like empire? Or does that not matter to him? Is it just about the House of Xana not being in control anymore? Does he want power, or does he just want them to not have it? Who is he putting in place? You know, like, so that's what I'm feeling like. I don't really know what he wants. And because I'm not totally sure about that, I don't know how to predict what he's going to do next, which I find pretty interesting, actually. I don't need to know yet, but I am kind of curious about it. Like, is he keeping an eye on these rebellions and trying to figure out who from these rebellions he can pick to, like, take the place of the present emperor? Is he going to work to like install somebody and have someone usurp the throne? Is that going to be what or is he himself going to usurp the throne? Those two things are going to completely change the way that he handles a bunch of stuff that comes up. So that's what I'm really curious about. It's like, in the end, what is he trying to do? Chatelain, they keep on pestering me with these reports of rebellion. What should I do? Ranga, these are mere bandits and highwaymen beneath your notice. You demean yourself by even wasting a second of your time to think about them. Announce that whoever brings you reports of such petty matters should be put to death. Let the regent take care of them for you. You are my only real friend, Chatelain. You always think of what's best for me. Thank you. Now what shall we do today? Shall we go to the Imperial Zoo and Aquarium so you can pet the baby Krubin? Or would you rather see the new virgins brought from Fasah? Ew. First of all, ew. But also, you're a devious little fuck. And I sort of want to see what happens. So, yeah. So, chapter 12. The rebellion grows. And this is the beginning of part 2, which is called Chasing the Stag. The Big Island, the 3rd month in the 4th year of the reign of righteous force. So, here we find out what's going on with the fishmen, which is what I'm going to be calling Shigin and Krima. Well, that's what I'm going to be calling Krima. The fishmen, I had been wondering like what the deal was with them trying to, establish that they were supposed to be rulers, and whether or not they really even wanted that, or whether they were just like, I don't know, let's just figure out a way out of this. Let's do this. This is fine. But this whole thing just gets way out of control. Before a crowd throbbing with anticipation, King Thufi named Krima the Duke of Napi, Marshal of Kakru, and Shigin the Duke of Canfin, Vice Marshal of Kakru. They were given orders to attack Xana forces everywhere until all former Kakru lands had been liberated. Krima and Shigin marched out of Karuza at the head of an army as the people showered them with flowers and fine white sand shipped from the Karuza's beaches, which I'm like, ew, sand? That doesn't seem nice, but whatever. This is the life, huh? said Rathomiro. He smiled at the pretty girls cheering along the street. We haven't met Xana's real army yet, said Defiromiro. Don't celebrate too early. The seeds of rebellion spread wherever the wind blew, and soon the conquered Tiro states re-emerged like fresh bamboo shoots after a long winter. All right, so I'm going to summarize what's going on here. A bunch of people are coming out of the woodwork who are taking back their titles, taking back their positions, getting people behind them to support them, yada, yada, yada. There is a reestablishment of a lot of like cultural stuff that kind of got dropped by the wayside as well. Of the 6 states, only Han remained completely under Xana occupation, but there was a Han government in exile, and King Kasugi of Han, who had surrendered to the Emperor of Mapidere when he was a young man 30 years ago, now lived in Karuza as a guest of the newly established King Thufi of Kakru. You'll soon see Jinpen again, Luffy promised Kasugi. Kasugi nodded, his wiry gray beard swaying and a pair of cloudy eyes peering nervously out of a face as dark and wrinkled as newly hardened lava, hardly able to believe this recent turn of events. Just a few months earlier, Xana had seemed invincible and the dream of reviving Han a fairy tale. So, Luffy, this king is a little bit of a dink. He's not a bad guy, but he's really so, lackadaisical about everything that it boggles the mind. All right. I'll get to that in a second. Let's go to Kindo, because chapter 13 starts off with Kindo, who is the accountant who has been assigned to be the, basically the general of this army. Kindo is hugely, he is an accountant in his soul. He is a Ben Wyatt. Right? He loves counting shit. He loves keeping track of things. He loves organizing and figuring it out and the puzzle of it all. This is his favorite. So being told that he needs to be commander-in-chief of all of the Xana's forces is a baffling decision and an honor that does not mean anything to him. He's just kind of like, but why? Which is what everyone else is probably also asking. And he decides that what he's going to do is first role is going to sit down and take stock of the forces and figure out exactly how many he has to order around and who is where and what kind of position they're in. Super smart. Honestly, that's what you should do. He's approaching this in 100% the right way, rather than just heading out there and assuming that the 100,000 troops, which are what is constantly tossed around as the number at their disposal. He doesn't do that. He figures out that there are a bunch of territories in which there are Xana soldiers who are basically trapped, that there's no way for him to give them orders because they're surrounded by the rebellion and they can't break out because they're overwhelmed wherever they're positioned. And then there are a bunch of forces that they're still acting like those are our forces here, but he knows that they've joined the rebellion at this point. It's not just that they're trapped, they're actively working against them now. And yeah, there's just, the whole thing is way more of a mess than anybody would want to admit if they sat down and looked at it. So the fact that he's deciding that he's going to sit down and look at it in a very real way is frankly probably light years ahead of what a lot of the folks that work for this emperor would do, because nobody seems to want to admit how bad the problem is. Even in the areas that Xana still controlled, the situation was far from secure. The large number of prisoners and Corvain laborers, forcefully conscripted from all over Dara, could easily be turned into a rioting mob. They would welcome the rebels from their homelands as liberators if they could launch a coordinated attack on the Imperial heartland. Liberators. That's the word I wanted when I said he was freed before. He was liberated. Third, the Navy and the Air Force were in bad shape. So yeah, the airships, the air that is used to float the airships, the gas, leaks out of the bags and has to be refilled, but they don't do that often in times of peace. So they're there's going to be a whole bunch of work that's going to have to go into just refueling them and getting them ready. And a bunch of the ships are worm-eaten and, they've just been sitting in the harbor abandoned practically. So all of that shit is really, really bad and is going to take a long time to fix. And then there's just the dealing with morale. And this is the main thing that makes me feel like this dude was the right choice, despite the fact that the person who assigned him gave it no thought at all. He understands how important the morale is and the fact that it's in the fucking toilet. And if it stays that way, there's no way to get people to fight for your side because they don't believe in it. And if they don't believe, they're not going to give a shit. So what he decides to do, first of all, is that he's going to conscript the laborers into becoming the army. So instead of them being a bunch of potential rioting mobsters, he's going to pull them into their own side. And as a motivation, they would be what is it? The inexperienced and new conscripts would be organized and integrated in such a way that no squad would consist of too many soldiers with the same homeland. Thus divided, disciplined, and watched over by Xana veterans, they might yet prove effective at holding off an assault. The prisoners and slaves would be freed on the condition that they distinguish themselves in battle. So offering them a way out if they become soldiers, then they can just leave the laboring, which I really wonder what the emperor is going to think of that plan, because it's going to, halt a lot of the work on the huge monument that he's trying to build for his father, but maybe he won't even notice because nobody tells him anything. So who knows? And I feel like this is the sort of thing that the chatelain is going to notice. This guy's being too efficient and too thoughtful, and the chatelain's going to need to step in and do something. And I'm not excited about it because I like this guy and I think that he seems like a decent dude, but who knows? I just like competence, okay? It really doesn't take that much to impress me. And the real solution lay in Ryu and Dasu, the Xana homeland. He would have to go back and raise up an army of dedicated believers in the cause. Never mind the harshness of the Empire's rules. Never mind that Xana's poor groaned under the imperial yoke as loudly as the poor in other states. If he could inflame their love of country and manly pride, the fresh troops from Xana could and would reconquer the 6 states one by one until Emperor Mapideri's dream was complete again. Yo, listen. Can we talk about nationalism and the fact that you're being taken advantage of by your own country, but if you are inflamed to have patriotism, despite the fact that you're being fucked up the ass, that you'll do anything and support the people who are oppressing you? How about that? And again, is he a bad man? Probably, for doing all of this and knowing that and exploiting that? Yes. But I still kind of like him because, again, competence. He's like Tywin Lannister to me. But dude, seriously, that is so many words to just say people are stupid. If they get themselves to believe they're better than others, they will support systems of oppression that oppress them. That's all it is. It really is. Just get them believing in Xana again, because that's where they personally live and that's where they were, they have this absurd pride. And they will help take down all these other, despite the fact that they are suffering just as much as everyone else and would benefit just as much from being released from all of this. Oh, it's so awful. So, that's that plan. Let's talk about Krima Shigin. I don't have that much time left, but Krima and Shigin are a disaster. Krima is getting high on his own supply. Krima is getting high on the smell of his own shit. He believes the bullshit that he has sold everyone else. And this is a thing that fucking happens. Man, it really is, though. People will lie about shit and then they will start believing it, and it's crazy to watch. I've fallen prey to this myself, especially when I was a teenager, and you know how teenagers are. And holy shit, the way that this all works out, first of all, they start approaching, they start approaching armies, and I hate to call them that, just outposts, I guess, with these, gangs of rebels, and all of the soldiers in the outposts wind up caving immediately because they see all of these rebels, and they're just like, well, what's the point? So they abandon their own cause, and they join up with the rebels, and it's just an easier way out. But Krima and Shigin start to think that they're just so amazing at battle, which I'm putting battle in quotes because they're not battling anybody. They barely have to do anything to get these guys to capitulate. But they start to think that this is proof that they are really good at this. And because of that, they don't give any attention to the actual army. It's just a mob of people who are looting and basically doing the same garbage to the townspeople as the Xana soldiers would do, except less organized and more there's a bit of blackmail there to it where, well, let us have this stuff or else you're going to be enslaved to Xana forever. And is that what you want? And they go into merchants' houses and just take shit and beat the hell out of people and just leave complete chaos and destruction in their wake. There is no like uniform. Everybody gets to wear whatever the fuck they want, use whatever kind of weapons they want. There's no like standardization to any of it. And there are no military exercises or training being performed. It's just absolute chaos. And they feel like that's fine because it's been working so far, and they don't understand that once you get to a certain point, you can't be doing it this way anymore. That was okay when you were having like 300 people, but you've got thousands and thousands of folks following you around now. And this whole thing, like, there was no pay except what soldiers could loot and take from civilians who were reported to have imperial sympathies in conquered cities. The rebels laughed, joked, told stories, or even sat down to take a nap when they felt like it. When the expeditionary forces approached a city, it was like a giant mob of peasants coming to market. Woe to any unfortunate merchant, farmer, woodsman, or fisherman who was caught by the rebels in their sweeping march through northern Kakru. Goods, money, livestock, crops, the rebels took whatever they wanted. The dazed victims were left on the ground, nursing their wounds and watching the dust kicked up by the mob army fading into the distance. The country through which the rebel army traveled looked like a field picked clean by locusts. And this whole thing is just so, it's so predictable. Like, unless things are kept really controlled really carefully and watched over really carefully by a third party who is not invested in this sort of thing, a lot of times the folks who are supposed to be liberating will turn into the exact thing that you were trying to escape in the first place. Hunger Games, anyone. So yeah, this whole thing is just really like hard to watch. Meanwhile, Fin Zindu and Mata are hearing about all of this from abroad and are just like, what the fuck, guys? You have so many opportunities to do this well. You have all these people at your disposal, and you are not fucking handling your shit at all. We are sitting here waiting for you to come and like give us leadership of the army, and apparently you're not planning on doing that. So what are we supposed to do? And Mata's finally like, you know what? I'm going to go over there. I'm going to deal with it. And this whole thing, this is so amazing. He's going over there with a bunch of his men who definitely believe in this cause. Like, they're chanting his name, Finn's name, by the way, I should say, Zindu. Zindu is both of their last name? Is Mata Zindu? It is Mata Zindu, right? Yeah, so it's both of their last names, Zindu clan. They're chanting Zindu without, like, being ordered to. Like, this is just something that the troops are inspired to chant because they actually believe in these people. And so they head over, and the whole, like, there's a brief thing with the gods talking back and forth. It's hard for me with the gods thing because I like it in concept, but because I don't remember the gods' names that well, and I don't remember what they represent that well, it's hard for me to like keep it straight who is supporting whom and what happening symbolizes which god. Like, for example, the thing with the belly of the fish, they assume that it's going to be the god of the oceans, but I don't remember who that is. It turns out to not be, but like, that's the kind of thing I mean. If there's something that's happening with like a like war, which one's the god of war, which one's the god of love, like, I just don't remember that stuff. So they are talking about the that Fithaweo, which is one of the gods of war, apparently. That Fithaweo has like made a pact that he won't interfere, but that he could do some things that are like quasi-interfering and sort of get away with it. And Kiji is being accused of motivating Mata because that's that's Fithaweo's type. Somebody like Mata who just like, you know, can slaughter 150 people with no problem on his own. And you picked your champion because you think you might get Lutho to help a fellow number cruncher. You're as transparent as those lakes on your mountain, which is amazing. And I want to know if it's true. I want to see what's happening. So once they arrived on the big island, Fin Zindu wanted to head for Karuza right away, but Mata had a different idea. I want to go see this Huno Krima myself. I don't know much about how to talk to kings and ambassadors, but I know how to talk with fighting men. Perhaps there's something that separates this man from his fellow commoners, and that is why King Thufi values him above us. And Finn says okay, but he then says even a king cannot tell a diamond apart from a white topaz without a hard enough surface to test them against, which I really love that phrase. I really, really do. So Mata rides out, and poor Mata, he has this horse that he really loves. Like, he's taking care of it and wants so much to have a horse, because growing up in training, there were no horses to be had. And now he's so huge that finding one that can support him is impossible. And he gets one that he thinks can handle him. And he's really happy and enjoying riding and everything. But he's so enormous that even this horse can't do it. And it winds up breaking a leg, and he has to kill it. And he's like crying over it. He's so bummed. And I just really felt for him in that scene. Like, yeah, that is really sad. Back when Shigin had suggested that they find the heir to the throne of Kukru to make the rebellion legitimate, it had sounded like a good idea, but now Krima wasn't so sure. He and Shigin had been the ones to risk their necks to raise the banners. Theirs were the names the soldiers recognized and followed, yet it was that young man, that mere boy who had done nothing, who sat on the throne. He pointed here and there, said this and that, and Shigin and Krima had to obey him. That did not seem right. And the prophecy, well, the prophecy was indeed a trick that he and Shigin had cooked up, but Krima preferred to no longer think about it that way. Instead, hadn't things mostly worked out the way the prophecy said they would? Weren't they winning? So maybe it was the gods who decided to give him and Shigin the idea for the scroll in the first place. And maybe the gods had moved his hands and fingers and composed that message and rolled it up and put it into the belly of that fish. He was merely the gods' instrument. Who knew for sure the gods didn't work that way? Oh, God. This whole thing. So, long story short, because I'm over time here and I'm going to be a little bit more over, fucking Krima believes now that he really was put here by the gods, that this is all ordained, that he is smiled upon, and that even though they orchestrated the whole bullshit themselves, that even that was the will of the gods, and, just whatever, jerk-off motion. So, he winds up killing Shigin. And everybody knows he killed him, and everybody just ignores it, because that's what you do when somebody's a maniac and kills everybody and has an entire army at their disposal. He's turning into a fucking tyrant and a maniac and a psychopath. And this whole, Thufi, King Thufi, gets word that he has declared himself king of West Kukru. And everyone's like, okay, so can we just bring him back and, execute him for treason? Because that's some bullshit. And King Thufi is like, yo, guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but he has the whole army. And frankly, he did do all the work. So I kind of get what he's saying. And lastly, people do this shit all the time. They just make up titles. They just divide stuff and make up new states. This happens. And I should just be glad that he's not trying to take all of Kukru. The fact that he's just doing West Kukru is a blessing and kind of a compromise, and I'm fine with that. So, you know what? Let us now do what we must and welcome him to the rank of the Tiro Kings. So he's behaving as if this kid is legitimate, which just adds to the whole bullshit. So we see Rotho, and he says something about how, just think we knew the king back when he was just like us. But then he's told by DeFiro, hey, don't say that. I think that he doesn't want anybody being reminded of his humble origins. And I think maybe talking about the belly of the fish overall, just off the table now. Let's just not, it was something that we could say was from the gods, but now it could be a weakness for him. So let's just pretend that never happened. Huno Krima goes bananas should be the title of the next section. It's the same chapter. But he winds up trying to get a bunch of statues made of the gods way too quickly. A priest argues with him that it can't be done, and he has the guy gutted in front of a crowd as punishment for arguing with him about it. And basically, it's a Lord of the Flies situation where the whole the throne, the banquet hall, all of it is a bunch of trash piled up to make tables and barrels put on top of each other to make a throne, food that's not cooked properly. And everybody's like, there's like a bunch of weird flags and whatever fabric they can find for tablecloths. Like, it's just a mess, right? And he's out here getting wasted and almost falling off the throne in front of everybody. And in comes fucking Mata, who is watching this whole thing from the sidelines, and nobody's aware that he's even there. And he stands up 8 fucking feet tall like he is and says, "I had come to study Huno Krima and Zopa Shigin, but all I see is a monkey dressed up as a man. You're no different from any of the fools Mapidere had elevated above their station. Neither imperial fiat nor popular acclaim can make an ant into an elephant. A man can never fulfill a role he is not born for." So then, of course, King Huno tries to have all of his guards kill Mata. Spoiler, you can't kill this motherfucker. You just can't do it. He uses a table, a literal table, as a shield. Picks that shit up. He gets on this horse, this crazy ass horse that has been, it's a huge horse, way, way bigger than anybody's ever seen in their lives. That is so foul-tempered that they've only been able to use it as a pack horse because it's really strong for being so huge. And nobody knows what to do with it. Well, guess who knows exactly what the fuck to do with it? Mata, who has found his soulmate in this horse. And this shit comes right up to him like it knows. And after he just avoids being killed by a million arrows, jumps onto that shit and runs out of there knowing exactly what he's about to do, which is take down that idiot sitting on a bunch of barrels acting like he's a king now. It's amazing. And I love it. And I love it so much. I love it so much. It's so satisfying, and everything, like him getting up and standing up and yelling in this guy's face. And like everything I had been wondering, this whole time, I didn't know that Shigin had been murdered yet. So I was also like, well, where is that guy? Where's his partner? And yeah, you find out a little bit later that his body is found in the moat. Like, go. And I love poor Rotho and Defiro. Like, Rotho is like, hearing all of these like rumors that King Huno is circulating about how Shigin was always kind of a drunk and just not very smart. And Rotho's like, could we have remembered everything so wrongly? I could have sworn. And Defiro, who's the smart one, is like, buddy, listen, just remember that whatever he says is what we have to say is true now. Be smart about this and shut your fucking mouth. Meanwhile, Kuni is hearing about all of this news and is just sort of like, well, I mean, maybe that guy who's saying he's king of West Kakru isn't super legitimate, but I'm now the Duke of Zudi, and that's nothing. So, like, let him do what he wants, and if he can hold on to it, then, like, more power to him. But that's not a thing that, like, I'm worried about, because I'm doing the same ass shit, so I'll just kind of watch what he does, and maybe if it doesn't work out, do the opposite. Which I think is just, like the best. Oh, the best. And it ends with, while King Huno promoted many people, none of them were from the group of 30 corvée laborers who had started the rebellion with him. Indeed, after the death of Duke Shigin, none of the laborers would even admit to having been there with him. Ah, the story of the fish. Yes, it's a very good story. I heard it from someone else. King Huno slept more easily at night. This book is so great, you guys. I love it so much. It's so crazy. So thank you very much, Kyle, for commissioning this. I've just been having a blast reading it. I was so excited that I got to do 2 of them this week. Because I think I did one on Tuesday, I think. And I was just like, oh, another one. I get to find out what happened so much sooner. So yeah, this is just really good. And I've been recommending it to so many people lately because it's like, it's a really intricate story, but there's still this sort of lightness to it, despite like all the murder and torture and mayhem, because of this like weird humor that's infused through it. And it's just really unusual in that regard. And I feel like, I don't know. I just really want more people to read it and know what it is. So I'm trying to get Owen to check it out. And you said the audiobook was good, and Owen's really into audiobooks, so I'm trying to get him to do that. Melanie says, yeah, I might have to check this book out. Do it. Seriously. It's really fun. And he's saying that the sequel is better. So I'm like, ooh, I'm excited about that because I'm really digging this. So yeah, I have to wrap it up. I'm 10 minutes over time. I think that's the most over I've gone on anything so far. But there was a lot to talk about, and I just needed to inject my 2 cents into everything, as usual. Also, I'm feeling better, so it's making me more talkative. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming, and thank you again to Kyle. Hope you guys are enjoying the coverage, and I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers!
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.